Yo, what's up? Welcome back to the Haunted Basement Studio. I'm your host, Triple B, and in this hardcore comic book review, we are going to do some more Sweetie Candy Vigilante. It has been a few months, a few issues that has came out that I have not got on the mic and talked about, so we're going to do it right now, and we're going to do it a little bit different because we're going to fly through the recap of issue 3, 4, and get to issue number 5 because issue number 6 is going to go down as one of the most craziest fights ever. Man, so it's been a few months since this book came out, and I had to search through freaking 5 to 7 boxes to finally find it, and I found it. So let's go through 3 real quick and see what's going down with Sweetie Candy Vigilante. So after the end of chapter 2, where one of the honeybees gets killed by the wasp killer, they were still able to make their sweet stuff and put it on the shelf for sale. And so Sweetie and her crew are having a meeting where they are saying how Bart Vulgaire must have been behind this incident of this assassination against one of the bees. Sweetie says, now we will deal with Bart Vulgaire and that mayor Derek that he has teamed up with. He is the only one that knows what happens with my parents' disappearance. And once I got the Easter Bunny back and named it Sweetie Candy Vigilante, we are working on the Fortress of Sweetness. And we will take down Bart Vulgaire and that Mayor Derek because they put a war out on sugar in this city. And that is not very nice. And then Sweetie says, a former friend of mine that shall not be named told me how to create the naughty list and how to enforce it. And them two are definitely on the list. And now we get introduced to Athena, who is the mayor's daughter and also Bart's girlfriend. And she is a news anchor on the TV. One of the stations there in New York. And as she gets to Bart's penthouse, he is kind of drunk, drinking some booze, and he is saying, I need you to go down to Sweetie Candy Vigilante shop with the film crew during hours and bust in on her and interview her. And she says, this isn't how things are done. We don't just go walk in unannounced with a film crew to try to get an interview with somebody. He's like, no, that's how you got to do it. She will hang herself trying to make this whole world sweet, just how she has ruined my life. And she says, why do you have a vendetta against her? And he says, I don't have a vendetta. That would mean that we are family, and she is not my family. I have no family. And you do as I say, or me and your mayor will just find another bubblegum bimbo to replace you down at the station. And she looks at him and says, damn, I wish I had a good boyfriend. Meanwhile, the moonlit shoreline of the murky East River illuminates 2 mysterious islands facing Manhattan and within earshots of New York City's notorious jail, Rikers Island, which resides directly behind them, the Bronx side of the East River. At Rikers Island, there's 2 security guards, and they see lights coming from the North Island and the South Island at the same time as they pull out their binoculars and they see this is Death Islands. Back in the tuberculosis days and the smallpox days, patients were sent to these islands to be quarantined, and they just ended up dying. Everybody who goes to those islands just die. And now why does it look like it's a fortress of lights looking like Disneyland? And as they get closer with their binoculars, they say there's 2 buildings being built, filled with purple lights, new trees, new plants, new flowers. What is going on here? And as they are calling in for backup, the backup comes back and says that the Death Islands no longer belong to New York City. They were bought by a private investor. And as they look closer with the binoculars, they said, don't worry, gentlemen. You can go back to your post. And he says, oh, I can see some words. What does it say? And it says, Sweetie Candy Vigilante. End of chapter 3. Chapter 3 was pretty damn good, dude. We got some crazy stuff going on with Sweetie Candy Vigilante. She's making all this money from her sweet shop, and now she is buying islands and making sweetness a fortress. So let's see what's going to happen in Sweetie. All right, man. Part 4 of Sweetie Candy Vigilante, Volume 2. And here we go as Athena walks outside of Sweetie Candy Vigilante's shop. And she is amazed with the line of people because they are in the middle of their big sale. And as she walks and starts interviewing some of the people in line, they are super rude to her. They're saying, "You Derek, get out of here. Nobody likes you." And she's like, "Oh my God, all these people waiting in line to get something sweet, they are awfully salty." Athena turns around and walks into Sweetie Candy Vigilante's shop, where she is met by Candy Wolf. And she says, "Oh, hey, how are you?" And he's like, "What are you doing here? And with that camera in the middle of our cell?" She says, "I just want to talk to Sweetie." And she says, "I am not Sweetie," as Pixie walks up and says, "What is going on, Candy Wolf?" And she looks at him and says, "Oh, you are Candy Wolf." Athena says, "I've heard a lot about you." Now Candy Wolf looks at her and says, "As if anybody of my kind would ever talk to you." And she looks at him and says, "Oh my God, Mr. Bad Wolf, don't bite me." As she turns and looks at the camera and says, "Does anybody have any silver chocolate covered bullets?" And now Athena walks around the shop where Pixie looks at her and says, "Who let this Derek in?" And Athena says, "Be careful, we are live right now. Everybody is watching you, Sweetie." And Pixie looks at her and says, "I'm not Sweetie." As Athena turns around where Sweetie is standing there and says, "I am Sweetie." And now CW says, "Turn off that camera." And Sweetie says, "No, it is just fine and dandy, CW. Let that camera jelly roll." And now Sweetie turns around and looks at Athena and says, "Oh, I know about your friends. And I know that he thought it was a good idea to send you here unannounced with your cameras. Isn't that right, Athena?" And now Sweetie looks at Athena and says, "I bet your viewers will appreciate your honesty. And you can ask me any questions, Mrs. Derek." And she says, "Oh no, you can call me Athena." And she says, "Athena, the goddess of war, isn't that right? Did you come into my sweet shop to start a war?" Athena says, "No, you are newsworthy, Sweetie. That's why I'm here. You are breaking the internet. There are people lined outside your shop, and everybody is wearing your swag. I just want to know what the deal is with all your sweets. And besides, handing out these sweets to all these people here in New York is bad because sweets are bad for you." And now Pixie says, "Boss is about ready to open this fortune cookie right up." And now Sweetie says, "Bad? I'll tell you what is bad for them. Bad is when you no longer believe that our city is good. Badness, Derek, is when you work for a news organization that the mayor owns and you purposely do a hit piece on a story of a small business owner who only wants to make her hometown of New York City sweet again. I only want to make people happy," as Sweetie points her finger at her. And she says, "Bad is when your father is the mayor and his high taxes destroy small businesses to make way for mega corporations." And then Sweetie says, "Bad is for people like you, your greedy partners, Bart Vulgaire, who brought most of New York City real estate and forced good people out of their homes because of high rents. Should I go on?" And then now Athena looks at Sweetie and says, "No, I don't know what you're talking about. I'm here to do a story on success, on your shop, and your brand. I am here for the honey bunnies that are made from locally sourced New York City honey. And that is newsworthy." And now Sweetie reaches out. Oh, you mean these honey bunnies that everybody wants? I'm sure that you heard stories from your partner, Bulgare, that these things cause wonders. So, how about you have one of these honey bunnies and eat it live for your newsworthy? And she says, no, 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 I'm good, I'm good. And as she runs away and drops her camera, Candy Wolfen looks at them and picks up the mic and says, ha ha ha, mic drop. And now Mr. Derek is on his way up to Bart's penthouse where Bart and Athena is waiting for him. And when he gets up there, Bart is losing his shit. He is complaining that Sweetie Candy Vigilante, we gotta take her down. And Derek says, man, that girl believes in the Easter Bunny and the Tooth Fairy. And Bart says she believes in them because they are real. The Easter Bunny is real. The Tooth Fairy is real. And this crazy bitch is trying to make New York sweet again. We need to stop her. How in the hell did she buy Brother and Sister Island? And Derek looks at him and says, well, the state owns those properties, not me. So she must have dealt with the state. And who cares if she owns those broken down islands? There's nothing on it but old abandoned buildings. And Derek looks at him and said, well, we'll just send in Bug Vespa, the exterminator, and he will take care of that sweet fortress that she's building over there on those islands. And then Derek says, maybe we're looking at this all wrong. Maybe we should go into business with Sweetie. We can make a sweet profit. And now Bart looks at him and says, I am never doing business with Sweetie. Don't you ever ask me that again, Derek. And then Bart says, we sent those murder hornets over there to kill her bees, and they brought some of her bees back. I thought maybe this is where she was getting her magic from, but this turns out that they're just normal green bees making organic honey. And then Athena says, organic green honey, grade A? Well, that sounds delicious. So I guess maybe it's just her magic. And Bart looks at her and says, her magic? Well, if you don't believe in her magic, then why didn't you try one of her honey bunnies and eat it and see what it did to you? And then Athena says, I got a degree from NYC and I am logical about these things. And then Bart just looks at her and says, okay, whatever you say, babe. And then now we cut back to the Fortress of Sweetness on the two islands across from Rikers Island, where Sweetie has set up her two new buildings and they're all done with construction, and it is a sweet candy cane land. And now we see Bug Vespa as he sees the lights from the islands and he says, oh, an extermination needs to be done over there. And lucky for me, I work 24 hours a day. End of chapter 4. Sweetie Candy Vigilante, issue number 5. As Sweetie is in her sweetness of fortress, she is on the balcony looking up at the moon saying, all is calm and all is bright, as she is waiting for the Tooth Fairy to show up. As the Tooth Fairy comes flying in, she gives Sweetie a big old hug and she says, oh my God, I'm so glad that you are here. And now the whole crew is inside the sweetness of fortress. As Candy Wolf walks up to the Tooth Fairy and gives her a big old hug and says, oh my God, I didn't think you were gonna make it. I sent you text, but I didn't hear back from you. And the Tooth Fairy says, don't worry, CW, I wasn't ghosting you. There's bad Wi-Fi in Middle Earth. And then Sweetie walks up with Pixie and says, Pixie, there's someone I want you to meet. This is the Tooth Fairy. And the Tooth Fairy looks at Pixie and says, oh my God, I heard so much about you. And Sweetie says, yes, pixies are gifted little sweet ninja. And Pixie is very interested in our weapon development department. And here, Dr. Wilder, she is going to tell you about her favorite tools to use, which is teeth. And then Pixie looks up at Dr. Wilder and says, you're a fairy? She says, no, I am the fairy. I am actually the Tooth Fairy. Pixie says, so you're actually the Tooth Fairy? She says, yes, and I'm Dr. Wilder. I'm a real dentist. That's my day job. That's my cover-up. So then Sweetie gives you the teeth from the bad guys? She says, yes, the teeth from the bad guys are what we use to make our weapons. The badder, the better, because each 32 teeth that is in your mouth is connected to your brain and to your heart. So the badder the person is, the worse the teeth is. And then we give these teeth to Hansel and Gretel, and then they use it with some science to make our weapons. And that's why all of Sweetie's candy doesn't hurt the good people. It only hurts the evil, wicked ones. And now Sweetie looks at the whole crew and says, this is the beginning. We all know that there is dark evil living amongst us in New York City. The darkness that is spreading to the rest of the world. All of our supernatural allies are now one force. We stand together and vow to destroy the evil that stands in our way of a sweet, good life. We will seek out our other immortal allies to join us and turn good folks into believers. And now Bug Vespa pulls up to the Fortress of Sweetness, and he texts Bart Vulgaire and he says, I'm at Sweet Candy's Skull Castle, and it looks like your sweetheart has been busy. And then Bart texts back, don't you call her that. She's not my sweetheart. You just get the job done. And as he buzzes and waits for the door to open, but no one comes, and he sees the intercom and he holds the button and says, may I speak to the owner of this property? Bug Vespa says, I got a dispatch from the Department of Environmental Protection about a possibility contamination on this property that might have created an infestation. I have an order from the department to conduct an investigation. And now Candy Wolf looks at him and says, whoa, boss, you see this guy? Dude looks like a half wasp. And Sweetie looks at him and says, not a wasp, more like a hornet. And now Candy Wolf says, should I tell him to buzz off? And Sweetie says, no, let's see what this pest is all about. Hey, Peter, am I locked and loaded? As he holds up the Jawbreaker candy gun. And Sweetie says, goody gumdrops for me? On my mark, Peter. He says, I'm there, boss. And now Sweetie looks at the monitor and he says, my, Hornet. How very interesting. There's a lot of talk about hornets in the news lately. And then she looks at Honey and says, you know, Honey, I've heard that certain hornets don't like honeybees. Some hornets have done some very naughty things. This bugger might be our bee killer. And then Candy Wolf says, we are ready, boss. And Sweetie looks at them and says, now, my loves, let's have a chat with our new pestie. Candy Wolf wants to see some credentials from the Bug Vespa. As he gets them, he lets him inside. And the exterminator says, I'm sorry to bug you at this late of the hour, but I do have a work order that I need to check out. Are you the owner of this property, boss? He says, I'm not the boss. Sweetie is the boss. And he says, well, can I talk to Sweetie? And all of a sudden, Sweetie shows up from behind him and says, I'm right here. And it kind of scares the exterminator. She says, I am Sweetie. And he says, you sure are. She says, I own this property. It's our darling new home. We're not used to uninvited visitors, especially at this late hour. He says the department order can be enforced at any time, any day of the week. The city doesn't care. And she says, this is private property and I own these islands. And he says, it doesn't matter. The city owns the river, that your house is in the middle of their property. The department can do whatever they want. And she says, well, I'll see about that. He says, go tell at the city hall. This is some place you got here, miss. And she says, Sweetie. Sweetie looks at him and says, who are you? He says, well, I'm Gino Vespa, a subcontractor for the department, and I was sent here by the mayor to check on the possibility of sewer rats, snakes, and other pests that can get into the water supply. She says, oh yeah, the mayor? And now Candy Wolf says, the only rat I see here is you. And he says, I am just doing my job, brother. And he says, don't call me brother. And now Vespa says, now I need to call in for backup since you made this a hostile work environment. And now Vespa says, I gotta call this in. There's a honeybee infestation here, producing hazardous material that is dangerous to our citizens. So my associates here are going to eliminate the threat. That's all. And he releases a bunch of hornets. And Sweetie looks at him and says, you're not a very good exterminator, Mr. Vespa. Everybody knows you shouldn't bring hornets to a bee fight. And now all the honeybees are attacking the hornets and killing them one by one. And now they're out on the balcony after all the bees have turned into an oven and killed all the wasps. And then they look at Mr. Vespa and say, now you can go tell the mayor you can close this claim. And then the bug Vespa exterminator jumps at Sweetie, but Candy Wolf steps in and says, you leave her alone, as he turns into a wolf. And then they start fighting, but then they fall off the balcony into the river. And then Sweetie looks down and says, I'm gonna save CW. And she strips off her clothes and she's wearing a tight ass bikini and looking fine as hell as she jumps in the river after CW. As Sweetie is diving into the river, the Tooth Fairy grabs CW and brings him back up to safety and says, what about Sweetie? She says that she can take care of herself. As Gino Vespa says, fuck you, Sweetie. And she says, oh, that's not very nice. As the piranha fish starts going after Vespa, she says, we can't have you polluting up our Swedish fish water. And as they attack Vespa and they're just eating the flesh off of him, Sweetie gets onto a water dragon. She says, take me back home. And as she gets back up to her fortress, she's putting on her robe and says, hey, does anybody else want some marshmallow hot chocolate? And then it shows Mr. Vespa floating back to the city, and their people are like, oh my god, there's a body in the water. And they look at it and they say, what's left of a body? End of chapter 5 of Sweetie Candy Vigilante. Oh my god, Sweetie Candy Vigilante is batshit crazy, and I'm absolutely in love with it. I think I'm in love with Sweetie Candy Vigilante. I'm in love with a comic book character. What the bleep is going on? Holy crazy, man. Holy bleep. So this is actually volume 2, so this is number 11 that's come out so far. So we have 11 issues in 2 different volumes. Volume 1 was this issue 1 through 6. Volume 2 is going to be 7 through probably 12. We'll see where it goes to. I'm thinking maybe part 6, volume 2 is going to be the last issue of this volume, because they're already talking about trying to get more immortals to come down, try to get a big old clan, a group of gang of goody, like almost fairy tale people, fairy tale characters together that are going to be like mercenaries trying to kill off the bad evil of New York and make the world sweet again. Freaking absolutely love it. If you have not seen or read any of the Sweetie Candy Vigilante issues, I'm going to put up my whole playlist right there. I've covered every single book so far on the channel, and it's going to be in order. So check out the playlist of Sweetie Candy Vigilante and hit the subscribe button with the bell so you'll be notified when chapter 6, issue number 11, 12 comes out. And then I'll be doing a review on that, of course. Man, thank you all for joining me, Triple B, in the Haunted Basement Studio. And if you want to see some Dynamite Mystery 10-pack unboxings, you want to see some sick-ass comic book reviews, and some secrets of pre-ordering, make sure you subscribe, man. We'll see you on the next one. You guys keep it hardcore. Comics. Laters!